I'm Harper, 28, female, and my boyfriend body shamed me at a photo shoot and publicly chased a female model. I didn't scream or cry or make a scene. I just stood there, invisible in a room full of bright lights and beautiful people, and watched the man I loved humiliate me in a way so profound it felt like it was happening in slow motion. And when he was done, I walked out without a word, an act of silent departure that would ultimately trigger the complete collapse of the perfect world he had so carefully built around himself. Our relationship hadn't always been a stage for his insecurities. In the beginning, Leo was charming, attentive, and endlessly ambitious. He was going to be a model, an actor, an influencer, a star. I was a graphic designer, quiet and content in my world of color palettes and clean lines. We were opposites, but it worked. I grounded him, he told me, and I was captivated by his energy, the way he seemed to vibrate with a belief in his own destiny. I loved him for it. I designed his first portfolio, built his website, and spent countless nights editing his social media photos to achieve the perfect balance of shadow and light. I was his biggest supporter, his creative partner, and his girlfriend. But as his online following grew, a subtle shift began, a slow poison seeping into the foundations of our life together. The first time I felt it, truly felt it, was about a year into our relationship. We were at a friend's barbecue. I was wearing a sundress I loved, a simple yellow cotton number that made me feel cheerful. I just grabbed a plate and was reaching for a hamburger bun when Leo's hand gently covered mine. "Hey," he whispered, his voice a low, cautionary hum. "Maybe go for the salad instead. We have that brand dinner next week. Got to stay sharp." He smiled as if he were giving me a helpful tip, a secret from his world of disciplined aesthetics. But his eyes flickered down to my waist, just for a second, and in that fleeting glance I felt a hot wave of shame. I mumbled something about wanting to save room for dessert and put the bun back, my appetite suddenly gone. Later that night, he posted a picture of himself at the barbecue, shirtless and holding a bottle of water, captioned, "Discipline is a choice. No days off, health is wealth." None of our friends were in the photo, just him. The comments were always about his appearance. His sharp jawline, his defined abs, his commitment. And slowly, my appearance became a project for him. It wasn't overt, not at first. It was couched in the language of health and support. He'd suggest we do a 7-day green juice cleanse together, even though he knew I loved my morning coffee and toast. He'd buy me a membership to his high-intensity gym, a place filled with aspiring models and athletes where I felt clumsy and out of place. "I just want us to be the best versions of ourselves, babe," he would say, kissing my forehead. "Imagine us, a total power couple." His version of a power couple seemed to involve me shrinking while he shone brighter. The comments became more direct, more cutting. Once, we were getting ready to go out, and I put on a pair of jeans I'd had for years. They were comfortable, perfectly worn in. Leo came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his hands resting on my stomach. "These are a little snug, aren't they?" he said, his tone light and playful, but the words landed like stones. Maybe those black pants would be more. Flattering, flattering. The word echoed in my mind. It wasn't about what I liked or what I felt comfortable in. It was about how my body was presented to the world as an accessory to his own carefully curated image. I tried to talk to him about it once. I told him his comments made me feel self-conscious, that I was happy with my body. He looked genuinely baffled, as if I were speaking a foreign language. "Harper, I'm in the aesthetics industry," he explained, as if that were a get-out-of-jail-free card for basic human decency. "Appearance is everything. I'm just trying to help you. Do you know how many girls would love to have a boyfriend who cares this much about their health and look?" He framed his criticism as care, his control as concern. And for a long time, a part of me believed him. I started to second-guess my own reflection, to see the flaws he so easily pointed out. The joy I used to find in food, in comfortable clothes, in just being, began to fade, replaced by a constant, low-grade anxiety about my own form. I was a project, and I was failing to meet the specifications. This slow erosion of my self-esteem was the backdrop to the day of the photo shoot. The day everything would be brought out from the shadows and into the harsh, unforgiving light. The morning of the photo shoot, our apartment was buzzing with a nervous energy that belonged entirely to Leo. He'd been awake since 5 a.m., I think, because I was woken by the rhythmic whir of the blender. I found him in the kitchen, shirtless of course, sipping a murky green sludge from a tall glass. His phone was propped against the fruit bowl, already recording a time-lapse of his morning fuel routine for his Instagram story. "Big day," he said, without looking up from the screen. His eyes were focused, his jaw tight. This wasn't just another shoot, this was the shoot. A major athletic wear brand, one that was known for launching the careers of its models, had booked him for a campaign. It was his first real, significant contract, the culmination of years of relentless self-promotion, gym sessions, and carefully calculated networking. For weeks, he had talked of nothing else. This was his launchpad. "I know, you're going to be amazing," I said, my voice still thick with sleep. I reached for the coffee maker, my own morning ritual. His eyes flicked over to me and he frowned slightly. "Coffee, Harper, you know the smell gives me a headache before a shoot. And the dairy, it's inflammatory." He said it so casually, as if he were merely stating a scientific fact, but it felt like another rule I had unknowingly broken. "It's just 1 cup, Leo," I sighed. "It's about the principle. The environment," he countered, turning back to his phone to add a filter to his video. "I need everything to be perfect today, no distractions." I was beginning to understand a potential distraction, yet he had been the one to insist I come. "I need you there," he'd said a week earlier, his eyes wide and earnest. "For moral support, you're my rock, babe." The words had warmed me, a brief respite from the constant, low-level chill of his criticism. I'd felt a pang of the old connection, the memory of the man who had seen me as a partner, not a project. So ID agreed. I cleared my work schedule, pushed back a deadline for a client, and promised to be there for him. Now, watching him meticulously arrange his gym bag, 3 different tank tops, protein powder, rice cakes, a face mist, I felt a familiar sense of unease. His need for my support felt less about comfort and more about having an audience, a personal assistant who would witness his ascent. "What are you wearing?" he asked, his gaze sweeping over my simple t-shirt and jeans. "This is fine, isn't it? I'm just going to be in the background." He paused, tilting his head. It was the look he got right before he was about to fix something about me. It's a fashion shoot, Harper. Everyone there is going to look the part. You don't want to look like you don't belong, do you?" The implication was clear. I didn't belong, not in my comfortable jeans and not in my own skin. "I could wear my black dress," I offered, my voice flatter than I intended. "Yes, perfect," he said, his smile bright and relieved, as if I had just solved a complex logistical problem. "See, we just need to present a united front. The power couple." He spent the next hour getting ready, a process more involved than my own preparations for a wedding. There was a charcoal face mask, an ice roller for his jawline, and a careful application of bronzing lotion to enhance his muscle definition. I sat on the bed, sipping my now lukewarm coffee in defiance, and watched him transform into Leo the model. He was a brand, a product, and his own most devoted consumer. In the car on the way to the studio, he was a live wire of nervous energy. He did breathing exercises, flexed his hands on the steering wheel, and dictated a long list of things he needed me to do. "Okay, so when we get there, can you make sure my water bottle is always full, but with filtered water, not tap? And if you see the creative director, his name is Marcus, be super friendly but don't, talk to him too much. Just smile. Oh, and keep an eye on my bag. My phone, my wallet, everything is in there." "I know, Leo. I'm your girlfriend, not your intern," I said, trying to inject some humor into the tense atmosphere. He didn't laugh. "This is just really important, Harper. I need you to take it seriously." The studio was a vast, white warehouse space in the industrial part of town. It was buzzing with activity. Assistants scurried around with clothing racks, photographers adjusted massive light umbrellas, and makeup artists laid out their tools on long tables. The air smelled of hairspray and expensive coffee, a smell Leo, ironically, didn't seem to mind when it wasn't coming from my cup. He immediately shifted into his public persona, his posture straightening, his smile becoming easy and charming. He greeted everyone with a familiar, "Hey, man," or a casual wave, moving through the space with an air of belonging that he had so worried I would lack. I trailed behind him, already feeling like a ghost in the machine, my black dress feeling less like a choice and more like a uniform designed to make me fade away. This was his world, and he had only granted me a temporary visitor's pass. Leo was immediately swept away into the vortex of wardrobe and makeup, leaving me to find a quiet corner to settle into. I found an unoccupied stool near the craft services table, a long folding table laden with everything from donuts and bagels to fruit platters and granola bars. It was an island of temptation in a sea of disciplined bodies. I watched the crew, a mix of wiry, energetic artists and impossibly cool, slender models, float past the table, most of them ignoring it completely or grabbing only a bottle of water or a single strawberry. I felt a pang of hunger. In the rush to get Leo out the door, I hadn't eaten. My eyes landed on a small, unassuming packet of almonds. It seemed like a safe choice, something even Leo might approve of. As I was reaching for it, I saw him walking towards me. He was now in his first outfit, a sleek, form-fitting set of athletic gear that made him look like a modern-day Greek statue. His hair was perfectly styled, his skin glowing under the studio lights. He looked incredible, and my heart swelled with a foolish, reflexive pride. "You're going to kill it," I whispered as he approached. He didn't seem to hear me. His eyes were locked on the packet of almonds in my hand. He stopped in front of me, his handsome face contorted into a mask of theatrical disbelief. "Are you serious?" he said, his voice just loud enough for the makeup artist touching up a model nearby to glance over. "What, it's just some almonds," I said, my voice shrinking. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Harper, look around." He gestured vaguely at the room. "This is a professional environment. We're on a job. I can't have my girlfriend snacking on high-calorie nuts in the corner like it's movie night." "It's a handful of almonds, Leo. I'm hungry." This is when he delivered the blow. He leaned in, and for a horrible second I thought he was going to be kind, to whisper something reassuring. Instead, he said, his voice a low, sharp dagger, "I'm trying to build a brand based on discipline and fitness. It's not a good look." Then he straightened up and in a louder, more performative voice for the benefit of anyone listening, he added, "Honestly, a little discipline wouldn't hurt you either. You should try it sometime." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. The makeup artist froze, her brush hovering over her model's cheek. A lighting technician who was passing by slowed his pace, his eyes wide. In that moment, the entire, vast studio seemed to shrink, focusing into a single point of my own burning humiliation. It wasn't just that he had shamed me. He had done it publicly, using me as a prop to reinforce his own brand identity. I wasn't his partner. I was a before picture he could use to sell his after. My face was hot, my hands were trembling. I dropped the packet of almonds back onto the table as if it were on fire. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. Before I could say a word, a voice called out, "Leo, we're ready for you on set." He gave me one last look, a mixture of annoyance and triumph, and then turned away, jogging lightly towards the white backdrop where the photographer was waiting. The moment was over. The makeup artist went back to her work, the technician hurried on his way. The world snapped back to its normal speed, but I was still trapped in that frozen, silent scream. I stayed on my stool, numb, for what felt like an eternity. I watched him work. He was a natural in front of the camera, moving with a fluid grace, his expression shifting from intense and focused to joyful and relaxed at the photographer's command. He was brilliant. He was beautiful, and he was cruel. And then she arrived. Her name was Isabella, and her entrance seemed to change the very atmosphere of the room. She was the female lead for the campaign, a model whose face I vaguely recognized from magazine ads. She was tall, with a cascade of dark hair and a warm, genuine smile that seemed utterly out of place in this world of practiced cool. She radiated a quiet confidence that was the complete opposite of Leo's loud, desperate ambition. The moment Leo saw her, he was a different person. During a break in his solo shots, while Isabella was getting her makeup touched up, he practically bounded over to her. The intense, focused athlete was gone, replaced by a fawning, almost boyish sycophant. Isabella, wow, it is an absolute honor to work with you, he gushed, his voice several octaves higher than usual. I'm Leo. I'm a huge fan of your work. Your campaign for that French perfume, iconic. Isabella smiled politely. Thank you, it's nice to meet you, Leo. You're doing great out there. Thanks, it means a lot coming from you, he said, leaning against the makeup table in a way he clearly thought was casual. You know, I've been following your career for a while. You're kind of my inspiration. From my corner, I watched this exchange with a sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. This was more than just professional networking. This was a performance. He laughed too loudly at her small jokes, touched her arm to emphasize a point, and asked a series of rapid-fire questions about her life, her career, her agent, barely letting her finish a sentence before jumping in with another compliment. The true horror began when they started shooting together. The campaign was for a couple's fitness line, and the poses were meant to be athletic, supportive, and intimate. With every shot, Leo pushed the boundaries. A pose that required him to place a hand on her back became a lingering caress. A moment where they were supposed to be laughing together became an opportunity for him to lean in so close his lips were almost touching her ear. The photographer had to gently correct him several times. A little more space, Leo. Keep it natural. Leo, let's look at the camera, not just at Isabella. Isabella handled it with a kind of weary professionalism, subtly shifting her weight or turning her face to create space, never once losing her composure. But I could see the tension in her shoulders. I could see she was uncomfortable. And I knew Leo could see it too, but he didn't care. He was in the presence of someone he considered his superior, and he was putting on the show of his life. The final act of my humiliation came at the end of the day. The shoot wrapped, and a smattering of applause went through the studio. Isabella, looking relieved, quickly changed back into her street clothes and began to say her goodbyes. Leo, however, was not done. As she made her way towards the exit, he intercepted her, blocking her path. "Hey, you're leaving already?" he asked, his tone laced with a desperate charm. "Yes, I have another appointment. It was lovely working with everyone," she said, her eyes politely scanning the room, avoiding his intense gaze. "We should definitely, connect," Leo pressed, pulling out his phone. "Maybe I could get your number. We could grab a drink, talk about the industry. I'd love to pick your brain." Isabella hesitated, a flicker of annoyance finally crossing her face. "I don't usually give out my number, but you can connect with my agent." "Oh, come on," he said, laughing it off as if she were just being coy. "Don't be like that. We had such a great vibe today." He was actually following her now, walking backwards in front of her as she tried to move towards the door. The few remaining crew members were watching, some with amusement, some with second-hand embarrassment. I was watching, paralyzed. He was literally, publicly chasing her. After everything he had said to me, after the way he had torn me down to build himself up, he was now debasing himself in pursuit of a woman who was clearly not interested. It was pathetic, it was painful, and it was the last straw. As he tried one last, desperate, seriously, just one drink, I stood up from my stool. My legs felt strangely steady. The hot flush of shame had been replaced by an ice-cold clarity. I walked past the craft services table, past the racks of athletic wear, and towards the heavy studio door. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at anyone. I pushed the door open and stepped out into the late afternoon sun, leaving him behind in the artificial world he loved so much. I didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. The silence in my car was a physical presence. It was so total, so absolute, that the gentle hum of the engine felt like a roar. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my mind was a chaotic storm. I replayed the entire day, every word, every look. The casual cruelty of his comment about the almonds. The way his face lit up when he saw Isabella. The pathetic, desperate chase to the door. Each memory was a fresh stab of pain, but underneath the pain, something else was beginning to form. A hard, protective layer of anger. I drove aimlessly for a while, the familiar streets of the city looking foreign and strange. I couldn't go home. Our apartment wasn't a home anymore. It was his showroom, his stage, and I was no longer willing to be part of the set dressing. Finally, I pulled over in a quiet park overlooking the river, a place we had gone on one of our first dates. The memory felt like it belonged to another lifetime, to two different people. I took out my phone. My thumb hovered over Leo's contact photo, a perfectly lit, professionally taken headshot, of course. For a moment, I imagined the conversation we might have. I imagined screaming at him, crying, demanding an apology. But what was the point? He wouldn't understand. He would twist it, turn it back on me, call me insecure, jealous, and dramatic. He would tell me I was overreacting, that I had misinterpreted his ambition as disrespect. He had already shown me who he was. I didn't need him to confirm it. With a final, decisive tap, I blocked his number. Then I went to his social media pages, the digital monuments to his own ego, and blocked him there too. It felt like close. Ing a series of heavy, soundproof doors. The silence was no longer just an absence of noise. It was a choice. It was peace. I expected him to notice I was gone within the hour. I braced myself for the inevitable fallout, the emails, the calls from his friends, the dramatic voicemails. But hours passed and there was nothing. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and still, my phone remained dark. The silence from his end was more telling than any angry tirade could have been. He hadn't even noticed. I had walked out on the biggest day of his career, and he was so consumed by his own reflection that my absence hadn't even registered. The anger I felt began to curdle into a profound, hollow sadness. I hadn't even been important enough to be missed. It was nearly 10 p.m. when the first message finally came through. It wasn't from a strange number or a mutual friend. It was an email with a subject line that simply read, "Seriously." My heart hammered against my ribs as I opened it. "Harper," it began, the tone already dripping with condescension. "I just got home and you're not here. My stuff from the shoot is all over the living room and you just disappeared. What is that? I'm calling you and it's going straight to voicemail. Did you seriously block me? After I told you how important today was. I needed your support and you just walked out. Unbelievable." There was no mention of his behavior. No hint of self-awareness. No apology. It was all my fault. I was the one who had abandoned him. I was the one who had been selfish. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling a little less sad and a little more numb. It was so perfectly, predictably him. A few minutes later, another email arrived. "Okay, I get it. You were probably a little jealous of Isabella. She's a big deal, I get that it can be intimidating. But that's on you, Harper. You can't let your insecurities sabotage my career. I was networking. That's how this business works. You're supposed to be my partner, you're supposed to understand that. This is incredibly immature." Jealous, insecure, immature. He was using his entire arsenal of dismissive labels, trying to neatly file away my pain into a box he could understand, a box labeled hysterical girlfriend. The body shaming, the public humiliation, none of it had even made a dent in his consciousness. It was just noise he had tuned out in pursuit of what he wanted. I didn't reply. I turned off my email notifications and leaned my head back against the seat, closing my eyes. I was exhausted, an emotional exhaustion so deep it felt physical. I thought about all the times I had accepted his suggestions, all the times I had changed my clothes, or skipped a meal, or stayed silent to keep the peace. I had been slowly erasing myself to make more room for him, and for what? To be treated like a disobedient employee on the most important day of his life. The final email of the night came around midnight. It was shorter, more frantic. "Where are you? Are you seriously doing this right now? I have to be up early for a meeting with the brand. I can't be dealing with this drama. Call me. Now." The mask was slipping. The cool, charming Leo was being replaced by the demanding, controlling man who lay beneath. His concern wasn't for my well-being, but for the inconvenience my absence was causing him. My drama was an obstacle to his schedule. I deleted all 3 emails without responding and started the car. I still didn't want to go back to the apartment, so I drove to the only other place that felt like a sanctuary, my best friend Clara's house. I texted her on the way, a simple message: "Can I come over? Bad night." Her reply was instantaneous: "Doors unlocked, teapots on." When I walked into her cozy, cluttered apartment smelling of chamomile and old books, the dam finally broke. I told her everything, the words tumbling out in a messy, tear-soaked rush. The comment about the almonds, the fawning over Isabella, the pathetic chase, the blame-shifting emails. Clara listened patiently, her expression growing stormier with every detail. When I was finished, hiccuping and exhausted, she wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and handed me a mug of tea. "Good," she said, her voice firm. "Good?" I asked, confused. "Good that you left, good that you blocked him. Harper, he's been dimming your light for years. I'm just glad you finally see it." She looked at me, her eyes full of a fierce, protective loyalty. "You are not a project to be fixed. You are not an accessory, and you are done letting him make you feel like you are." In that moment, surrounded by my friend's unwavering support, I knew she was right. This wasn't just the end of a bad day. It was the end of an era of self-doubt. The aftermath was painful, but it was also a cleansing fire. Leo had tried to burn me down with his words, but instead, he had only succeeded in burning away the last of my illusions. About him. The next few days were a strange mix of radio silence and digital noise. I stayed with Clara, cocooned in the safety of her apartment, while the world I had shared with Leo continued to spin on without me. He didn't email again. I assumed he had decided to punish me with his absence, a classic tactic of his. When I had displeased him in the past, he would often go quiet, forcing me to be the one to break the silence and apologize, even when I had done nothing wrong. But this time was different. I didn't reach out. I was healing, piece by piece, supported by Clara's endless supply of tea and terrible reality television. The confrontation I had been dreading didn't happen face to face. It happened, as so much of our life had, on a screen. On the third day after the shoot, Clara slid her phone across the coffee table to me. "You should probably see this," she said, her voice neutral. It was Leo's Instagram page. He had just posted a series of professionally shot photos from the campaign. There he was, laughing with Isabella, his arm around her, the picture of health and happiness. But it was the caption that felt like a direct, calculated attack. "What an incredible experience shooting with the legendary at Isabella Vance and the whole team at Activewear brand. It's so important to surround yourself with people who are on your level, who push you to be your best. Feeling so energized and inspired. Onwards and upwards. Blessed model life, no negative vibes." No negative vibes. The phrase was a dagger, aimed directly at me. In his public narrative, I was the negativity he had to overcome. I was the dead weight holding him back from his glorious destiny. He had completely rewritten history, erasing his own abhorrent behavior and painting me as the villain of his success story. He followed it up with a story on his page. A boomerang video of him clinking glasses with someone out of frame, with the text, "Celebrating the good things with the people who get it." I felt a surge of rage so intense it made me dizzy. He was not just ignoring what he did, he was actively creating a false reality where he was the triumphant hero. The thousands of people who followed him would see this and believe it. They would see the perfect smile, the glowing caption, and they would like it, validating his lie. The injustice of it was suffocating. This was his true confrontation, a public relations campaign waged against my private pain. "He's a monster," I whispered, handing the phone back to Clara. "He's a coward," she corrected, "and cowards eventually trip over their own lies." I wanted to believe her, but in the glossy, curated world of social media, it felt like the lies were winning. He had the platform. He had the audience. All I had was the silent, unseen truth. The next day, everything changed. I was at my laptop, trying to distract myself with work, when a text from Clara popped up on my screen. It wasn't words, just a link to a post on a popular online gossip forum, one that focused on the local fashion and influencer scene. The title of the thread was, "Ugly Behavior at Activewear Brand Shoot." My heart started pounding. With trembling hands, I clicked the link. The original post was from an anonymous user who claimed to have been part of the crew. "I don't normally do this," the post began, "but I witnessed something so unprofessional and just plain mean at a shoot the other day that I can't stay quiet." The male model, Leo, who is trying so hard to be a big deal, brought his girlfriend to the set. She seemed really sweet and supportive. At one point, he completely humiliated her in front of several people, making a nasty comment about her body because she picked up a snack. It was awful. Then, the entire day, he was practically drooling over the lead female model, Isabella, who was clearly uncomfortable with his aggressive flirting. The worst part was at the end, when he literally followed her to the door begging for her number. It was embarrassing for everyone. My breath hitched. Someone had seen. Someone had understood. I scrolled down, my eyes flying across the screen. The comments were flooding in. A few were skeptical, but then a second anonymous user, identifying as another crew member, chimed in. "This is 100% true. I was there." The guy was a total creep. His poor girlfriend looked like she wanted to disappear. And then came the bombshell. A third user posted a comment. "Talk is cheap. How about a visual?" Attached to the post was a short 15-second video clip. It was grainy, clearly filmed on a phone from a discreet distance, but it was undeniable. The video started with Leo standing in front of me, his back mostly to the camera, but his voice was perfectly clear, sharp and condescending. "Honestly, a little discipline wouldn't hurt you either. You should try it sometime." The camera then panned slightly to capture my face for a split second, my expression a mask of pure shock and hurt. Before I dropped the almonds back on the table. The video was devastating. It was the truth, raw and unfiltered. It was everything Leo had tried to hide behind his perfect smile and inspiring captions. The forum thread exploded. Within an hour, it had hundreds of comments and was being shared across other social media platforms. People were tagging Leo. They were tagging the brand. They were tagging Isabella, offering her sympathy. The narrative was shifting with breathtaking speed. The hero of the story was suddenly, undeniably, the villain. I stared at the screen, my hands covering my mouth. It felt surreal, like watching a movie of my own life. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions, vindication, relief, and a surprising pang of sadness. This was the confrontation I had thought I wanted, but seeing it play out so publicly was brutal. This wasn't just about a breakup anymore, it was a public execution of his character. Clara came and stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. "I told you," she said softly, "the truth has a way of coming out." I refreshed the page. Leo's original glowing Instagram post was now being flooded with new comments. "Wow, so no negative vibes just means shaming your girlfriend in public," one person wrote. "This is the real you, disgusting," wrote another. Someone had commented with a simple snake emoji, and it had been liked hundreds of times. The tide had turned completely. The digital army that had once validated him was now turning on him, armed with a 15-second clip of his own cruelty. The confrontation wasn't between me and him anymore. It was between Leo and the perfect image he had worshipped, and that image was shattering into a million pieces. The fallout was faster and more spectacular than I could have ever imagined. The leaked video was a wildfire, and Leo's carefully constructed social media empire was the kindling. Within 24 hours, the story had been picked up by several online entertainment blogs. The headlines were brutal. Aspiring model Leo exposed for body-shaming girlfriend. On-set drama. Influencer's perfect image crumbles after leaked video. They embedded the video, his cruel words now echoing across the internet for anyone to hear. Leo's first move was to delete the flood of negative comments on his post. But for everyone he erased, 10 more appeared. It was like trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon. His next move was to set his account to private, a move that only fueled the fire, making him look even more guilty. But the screenshots were already everywhere. The internet never forgets. The most significant blow came 2 days later. The athletic wear brand, which had been tagged relentlessly in thousands of posts, released an official statement. I read it on a news site, my stomach in knots. Activewear brand is committed to fostering an environment of respect, inclusivity, and positivity. The behavior displayed in a recently circulated video by an independent contractor is in direct opposition to our core values. We do not condone body shaming, harassment, or any form of disrespect. As a result, we have terminated our relationship with the individual in question, effective immediately. The campaign will be reshot with new talent. They had dropped him. The contract that was meant to be his launchpad into stardom had become a parachute that failed to open. His big break had broken him. I should have felt a surge of triumphant joy. I should have felt vindicated. And a part of me did. It was a relief to know that there were consequences for his actions, that he couldn't just treat people terribly and get away with it because he was handsome and ambitious. But as I sat there, rereading the corporate statement, my primary emotion was a profound sense of melancholy. This wasn't a victory, it was a tragedy. It was the end of the man I had once loved, or at least, the end of the dream he had been chasing. I thought of the early days, of his infectious energy and boundless optimism. Somewhere along the way, that optimism had curdled into a desperate, toxic need for validation that had poisoned everything it touched, including me. The person in that video was a stranger, but he wore the face of the man I had shared my life with. My phone, which had been blessedly quiet, began to buzz with texts and calls from mutual friends, people who had been silent for the past week. "Harper, I am so sorry," one message read. "I had no idea he was like that." Another said, "I just saw the video. Are you okay? I'm on your side 100%. They were messages of support, but they felt too late. They were seeing the proof now, but where had they been when I had been living the reality? It was a stark reminder of how easily people accept the curated version of a life, and how reluctant they are to see the messy truth underneath. I received one message that stood out. It was from an unknown number. "Hi Harper, this is Isabella. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. A friend in the industry passed along your number. I just wanted to say I am so incredibly sorry for what you went through at that shoot. His behavior was completely out of line, both towards you and towards me. No one deserves to be spoken to like that. I'm glad the brand did the right thing. I hope you're doing okay." Tears welled in my eyes as I read her message. She didn't have to do that. She could have stayed silent, moved on to the next job, and forgotten the whole ugly incident. But she had reached out with simple, genuine kindness. Her validation, more than the public outcry or the brand's statement, felt real. It was a moment of grace in the midst of the chaos. I texted her back, thanking her for her kindness and wishing her the best. It was a small, clean, and honest exchange, a world away from the tangled mess of my relationship with Leo. A week later, I went back to the apartment to pack my things. I coordinated with Leo through his sister to ensure he wouldn't be there. The place was a mess. His gym bag was still overturned in the living room, just as he'd described in his first angry email. Piles of clothes and empty food containers littered the space. It was the mess of a person spiraling, the perfect facade stripped away to reveal the chaos underneath. As I packed my books and clothes into boxes, I felt a sense of detachment, as if I were packing up the belongings of a person I used to know. This apartment, this life, it didn't fit me anymore. It was like a dress that had become too tight, constricting my breath. When I was done, I took one last look around. On the coffee table was a framed photo of us from a vacation 2 years prior. We were both smiling, happy, and carefree. It felt like looking at ghosts. I picked it up, removed the photo, and left the empty frame behind. It seemed fitting. That's all that was left of us, an empty frame. 6 months passed. The winter chill gave way to the tentative warmth of spring, and with the changing season, I felt a profound shift within myself. The anger and sadness that had clouded my world for so long began to dissipate, replaced by the clear, bright light of acceptance. I was no longer the girl who cried in her car in a riverside park. I was someone new, someone stronger. I had moved into a small but sunny apartment of my own, a space that I filled with plants, books, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee every morning. I had taken on new and exciting projects at work, pouring my energy into my designs and building a reputation for my creativity and professionalism. My work was mine, born of my own talent, not a supporting role in someone else's production. I reconnected with old friends, went on long hikes, and rediscovered the simple joy of eating a meal without calculating its caloric cost. I was learning to listen to my own voice again, and I was surprised by how kind and confident it had become. I rarely thought of Leo anymore. His name had faded from the headlines, his social media presence erased. I heard through the grapevine that he had moved back to his hometown, his modeling career over before it had ever truly begun. He had become a ghost in the city where he had so desperately wanted to be a star. I felt no satisfaction in this knowledge, only a quiet pity. He had built his entire identity on a foundation of external validation, and when the world looked away, there was nothing left. One sunny Saturday, I was sitting at an outdoor cafe, sketching in my notebook when I saw him. It was a jarring, surreal moment. He was walking on the other side of the street, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans. He looked smaller, less imposing, stripped of his designer clothes and self-important swagger. He was just a man, no longer a brand. Our eyes met for a fleeting second across the busy street. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a shadow of shame, before he quickly looked down and hurried away, disappearing into the crowd. I didn't feel a jolt of pain or a surge of anger. I felt nothing at all. He was a stranger to me now, a closed chapter in a book I had long since finished reading. In that moment, I knew I was truly free. My worth was not something that could be given to me by a boyfriend or taken away by his criticism. It wasn't defined by the number on a scale or the clothes I wore. It was something intrinsic, something I had owned all along. He hadn't broken me. He had only broken the illusion that I needed his approval to be whole. My story is not one of revenge. What happened to Leo wasn't something I orchestrated. I never leaked the video or spoke a word against him to anyone but my closest friend. His downfall was not my victory, but the natural consequence of his own actions. He built his perfect image out of brittle lies and polished cruelty, and it was only a matter of time before it shattered under its own weight. I simply chose to walk away before I was cut by the falling glass. For anyone out there who has ever been made to feel small, who has had their light dimmed by someone who was supposed to protect it, know this: your value is not up for debate. You are not a project to be fixed or an accessory to be curated. You are the main character of your own story. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to stop participating in a narrative that doesn't serve you. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to leave without a word and start writing a new chapter, one where you are the sole author of your own happiness.